Hello and welcome to Addiction Recovery Revolution. I'm your host, Debbie Nelson, and I'm pleased to introduce Sean Davis. Sean is blowing up the internet and has always blown up the internet with his activism and his poetic writing of addiction. And he's touched me, and I feature his things frequently in Addiction Recovery Revolution, and I know he touches many people. So welcome, Sean.
Hi.
I always like to start just because anyone who's read your work, it always touches someone at some moment. I mean, there's something that I'll read and I'll be like, oh. And I don't always how poetic you are, but at the times you're also so very, just very real.
I try to be real through the writing.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to tap into universal feelings. I mean, they're obviously my personal experience, but I try to take time to write it so that it can resonate with a larger audience rather than a smaller one.
Right. What would you say? I mean, I always like to start out just because your story, I mean, what's your personal recovery story that,
well,
your inspiration?
My father was an alcoholic addict, and I kind of fell into his shoes. When I tell my story at like a 12-step meeting or something, I usually talk about, how I started out, and drugs and alcohol were a way to change the way that I felt. And it worked well for a long time. It was allowed me to do things I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. But, slowly it turned on me like it does a lot of people that, I assume it's a genetic predisposition, but, I came to rely upon that crutch more and more throughout the years, and got to a point where I started drinking and using, not to change the way that I feel or felt, but to not feel at all. And like for me, the real bottom that I hit was when my father passed away, and I wanted to blot out the feelings that I had surrounding that, and never really dealt with his death, and just kind of turned to drugs and alcohol to make myself feel better from it. That bottom was, probably more than 20 years ago, and wouldn't get me sober. I would kind of bounce along or skip along the bottom for a while, and, my life was kind of up and down. Great things would happen. I had 2 kids, I got married, but slowly that stuff, I traded that stuff for drugs and alcohol, and I got to a point where, I lost the house that I built, I lost the wife, kids were taken from me, moved to an apartment, lost the apartment, lost every job, and ended up to a point of homelessness, being arrested, and going to the behavioral health unit. That was a fun one. And, went to rehab 3 times. And the 3rd time in rehab, I was beaten and broken enough to take some other direction, and not, try to stay sober on my own will. And that's when I was introduced to 12-step recovery, and I got a sponsor, and my life really began to change. I moved, the last time in rehab was in 2008, and I moved directly, upon graduation from the rehab, I moved directly to a sober living environment, and just really let my sponsor and the program lead me around by the nose.
Right.
And that's, really where it started. And I started sending like daily reflections and just for today's to a group of people, because I was so inspired by the other writings that I had read. I do have a background in writing. I used to be in a band and a songwriter, and so I have a passion about putting pen to paper. And I was able to develop that into something that I can share with other people and sort of spread the message of hope and let people know that there's a solution for their problem.
I think that's the most poetic part, is that the daily postings that you do really are an activism on your part. I mean, you're an author, but you're inspiring a whole group of people that all of a sudden will read your work and realize that they're not alone, that this is someone who's also in recovery. But what's wonderful is that you're relentless as far as sharing this work. You're relentless in the sense that you're reaching people that that are crying out. You know, everyone, they read various postings and it always resonates with somebody. Somebody's like, this is just how I felt. This was great. I love that it's something that you are so passionate about that you continue to do it. You do this, and I always say that there's true activists that are out there, but it's not like they're in it for anything other than to share their recovery with the world.
Yeah.
And
I don't have a, you know, I don't do it for any kind of profit or anything like that. I mean, you know, I have a day job. You know, I work on trees. I'm a certified arborist. And so, you know, it's not about that for me. It's about sharing the message of hope. And I think that there's a lot of people that struggle and suffer and think that they're alone and think that, you know, it's a addiction and alcoholism is a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And really, you know, recovery in general, people recovering from grief, from codependency, you know, all that stuff is really the same message to me, that letting people know that there's hope and there's a different way of living.
Well, your activism is the purest form of activism. And I have so many people, I like to feature activists on this because I always say, okay, well, here's viable solutions, here's things that people are doing. But then also I always say my activists are the ones that keep people motivated. They're the ones that are out there that are saying, no, I'm doing this. So when you feel low, look to me. And there's people all over the world that are doing this, and they're not doing it for money. I mean, you know, Addiction Recovery Revolution isn't for money. It's for a platform that's non-biased so that people can show the things that they're doing that are for recovery, but also for activists, you know, so then that way it's like a forum that people can go to that's safe and hear other people. And, you know, because you and I were so out there, like I always assume everyone's at the same place and they're not. Like for me, I honestly don't care if anybody knows. I'm shocked at how many people will say, I'm really, I don't want to be associated with Addiction Recovery Revolution because I don't want anyone to know I have a problem.
Yeah. And anonymity, that idea of anonymity is a real personal thing.
It is.
You know, putting your past out there for everybody else. And I can understand people that aren't ready to or not willing to. You know, so I respect that as well. I don't feel that I'm really personally served by keeping any secrets. You know, there's a saying in the program that you're only as sick as your secrets, and I choose not to be sick anymore, you know.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for taking the time. I always like everyone to be able to know how they can get in touch with the person, because you are an author and you've penned thousands of personal things. If there's anyone out there that wants to be able to see your work, you need to let them know how they can get in touch with you.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm more than willing. You can friend me on Facebook. It's Sean Cooper Davis from Santa Cruz on Facebook. You can message me. You can email me. It's treekeeper, one word, 03 at gmail.com, of course. And, you know, I'm more than willing to share my experience, strength, and hope with anybody who wants, and just listen, you know, I can listen too.
Well, thank you. Keep inspiring us all. I love your work. I'm a huge fan of yours. So I was really pleased that you took the time to be on to inspire some other people. And make sure that you go on and you friend Sean, because his work, I mean, and it's featured all the time in Addiction Recovery Revolution. He's in many, many addiction forums, so you'll see his face everywhere. So we finally got, although usually it's like half a face is on his Facebook, so we got to see the full beautiful face. So, all right, thank you, Sean, for taking the time.
Okay, you can also check out my blog, which has the same posts. It's at World Press, which is a blog site, and it's the Tree Keeper blog. So you're welcome to look that up.
I mean, everyone needs to be a part of it. I mean, because honestly, his inspiration is just like reading, you know, just for today. I mean, I love your posts because that's the way I look at it. It's like another posting that kind of resonates with me every single day. So,
well, thank you, and keep your eye out for the daily reader. I'm going to make a daily reader. I have a
oh,
goal
good.
to try and publish something myself before the end of the year. So
Awesome. I can't wait to see it. We'll definitely be promoting that. So thank you for being on Addiction
thank you so
Recovery
much.
Revolution. Thanks.
Bye.